Hi, welcome everyone. Sorry we're getting started a little late, but if you were looking for the segment on marketing a diverse grain rotation, you are in the right place. My name is John Clark. I work with the Addison Grain Collaborative. No doubt you've heard a lot about our organization some this weekend already, but just a quick overview. We're a network of researchers, Midwest farmers, food businesses, and advocates supporting the regional grain supply chain. And really, it's a great network to join if you're a farmer and interested in diversifying your grain rotation to market food-grade grains. We have someone in the network, or we have a resource available with tips on cultivating these grains, unique post-harvest handling tips, maybe value-added processing equipment you need, safe food handling guidelines, putting together your packaging, all of that. There's someone in the network who can speak to that, and I really think that's the strength, of the AGC, is that it is collaborative. You have folks with the kind of hard-earned functional knowledge of how to do this stuff, and ultimately they're willing to share it, like our three panelists here today, who are all AGC members. Each of them are going to take a turn here at the podium, presenting more about their farm businesses and products they market. Then after that, we'll go through some panel questions with me, and we'll keep a good chunk of time at the end for questions from the audience. Sound good? All right, thanks. Thanks, Hallie. Well, thanks for being here. I think first up, Claire, come on down. Claire Smith, Tenera Grains, Teffola Granola.
Yeah, try it. This one? And that's the pointer. Yes. Fun. Cool. Morning, everyone. My name is Claire. I'm the maker, baker, and founder of Teffola. And we're going to go through what Teff is and granola in a second. So our farm is in Addison, Michigan, which is down here. And this is Michigan. It's not Wisconsin. So we are a seventh generation family farm. Started as, a dairy and has moved into row crops. And my dad took over the family farm from his dad in about 2012 and introduced a ton of cover crops and crop rotations. And even though we had been no-till for a while, he really started to get into this soil health thing. Regenerative wasn't really a word that was around at that time. So he was just really interested in the soil health. And so we had been growing corn, wheat, soybeans, maybe some alfalfa. And in, 2014, we started being interested in what else was out there. Was this really all that the farm was going to do? And we just looked at the options, and we didn't think that the farm was going to last, even one more generation, much less 7 more generations, if we continued down the path that we were going. And so we knew something had to change. And so a family friend approached us and heard about our woes, farmers complaining about stuff. So he said, you could try growing teff, which is a gluten-free ancient grain from Ethiopia. And they use it to make injera, which is a fermented kind of flatbread. And there's a huge Ethiopian and Eritrean expat population here in the States. And so we thought we could grow it, sell it to them, and be millionaires. Because that's why we get into farming, right? Is to be millionaires. So no one had ever grown teff in Michigan for grain before, and it's not really a common grain to grow. Mostly it's used for forage. Horses and llama really like it because of its high protein content, and, they seem to like it. So we started growing it for grain. 2015 was our first year. And we had absolute beginner's luck, and it was, to date, the best year we've had. But it was really difficult. We harvested in the rain, which is not great. Teff loves hot, dry climate, and Michigan is not necessarily hot and dry. I'm really selling Teff for you, but so we made it through. We figured some things out, but most importantly, we had to figure out those next steps. How do you get it from the field to something that we could actually sell? So in Southern Illinois, we found a cleaner who actually knew what teff was and could clean it. And so we shipped it from Southern Michigan all the way down to Southern Illinois, got it cleaned, shipped it all the way back, then shipped it out to a mill who, again, had heard of teff no one knew what teff was back in 2015. So we shipped it out to Pennsylvania to get it milled, and then shipped it out to Amazon in little 2 and 5 pound bags of flour. I had no idea what we were doing. We were absolutely clueless, but we just wanted to try something different, because trying something is better than doing nothing. You kind of get frozen in that do nothing stage. And so we were trying something. And then I took teff one day and threw it in granola, and my sister ate a pound of it. And I was like, maybe we should do this. So I started a food brand called Teffola, so teff granola. And I started it with $4,000 and a singular recipe in a shared commercial kitchen, selling at farmers markets, and slowly grew it to the brand it is now. So we've been around for 7 years. We have a bunch of different SKUs of granola. We partnered with Zingerman's Deli, which is a famous deli in Michigan. We've launched a second product line called Teffola Bites, which is Teffola mixed with dates and flavorful add-ins for an on-the-go option. And we've gotten into a lot of stores, and we're going the fundraising route. We were, going to become the snack of Starbucks and Costco and all these great, wild, amazing plans. But I took a very honest look at my numbers, and we were not only losing money, but like really losing money. And again, maybe farmers here can relate to that. But we started with a co-manufacturer. So I outsourced production because they could actually make it better than I could. And it left me time to focus on building out our supply chain better. And we wanted more of our ingredients to be sourced directly from producers. So along this time, in 2020, my dad built a gluten-free cleaning and processing facility on our farm. So we started cleaning and dehulling buckwheat in this facility. And so it's pretty small at the moment, 2,400 square feet, and there's a lot more equipment than that. As you can imagine, we just kept collecting equipment from auctions and forklifts, and somehow pallet racking was never purchased. And so in all of that, we still have a ways to go, but we use a clipper, a gravity table, a destoner, dehuller, and a color sorter. And the color sorter has changed our operations. I will say it's just been absolutely incredible. So I highly recommend a color sorter. So in the future, what we would like to do is build out more of our operations for what we can clean and process. I'm specifically super excited about oat processing because there isn't any gluten-free oat processing in Michigan. And so I would really like to build that out. Not sure if my dad is ready for another one of my ideas, but I am. So we also would like to contract out buckwheat growing with other farmers. So our main client is looking for organic buckwheat. And so it's been great at this conference being able to connect with some of you who are growing organic buckwheat. So we can present our buyer with, look, the Midwest can grow buckwheat, and we can grow high quality buckwheat too. So that is a little bit about our farm. Do I have anything next? So our secret, it's not a secret. You just got to live it. And you have to know your product super, super well. And you have to create a high quality product. I mean, so many people in here have high quality products, and what makes the difference when you're selling directly to consumers is being able to tell your story really, really well. You are your story. You just tell your story really well. And people really resonate with that because when you talk about the struggles you faced in pivoting your farm or stuff like that, like people have been through those types of struggles before, so they can relate to it. And there's always this admiration for overcoming difficulties, no matter what industry you're in, and that really resonates with people. So this is a teff field. It's very low to the ground. But yeah, so that's a little bit about CPG. I could answer a lot of questions about, or talk for a long time about consumer packaged goods and dealing with wholesalers and retailers and website and Amazon and distributors. I won't get too into the weeds there, but your numbers are super, super important. So make sure your numbers are strong. But yeah, that's a little bit about our journey from, just being a grower of, feed corn to growing food grade and creating a food brand that people in our area really recognize as a high quality product. So that is all I have. And I'll pass it on back to John, I guess. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Claire is a wealth of knowledge. I have talked to her several times about anything and everything regarding the regional grain supply chain or marketing food grade grains direct to consumers as consumer packaged goods. So definitely seek out Claire if you want to talk more about that. But we will open to questions at the end. Noreen, you're up next. Come on down. Noreen Thomas, Doubting Thomas Farm.
So I'm Noreen Thomas, Doubting Thomas Farms. We're in the deep north. You have the deep south, we're the deep north. Think of the coldest cold and then colder yet. That's us. We're near Moorhead, Minnesota. It's a 6th generation farm. I was busy working as a chemist and nutritionist, and boom, met my husband. And that's how I got to farm. So I landed on the farm, and I was very confused on a lot of things. But I decided that, you know what? I don't think I want to work in town anymore. I think I want to work on the farm. So my husband said to me, you can do whatever you want. Just make sure you make money. So I said, game on. And so our mission is to provide really nutrient-dense food for families, and it's better for the environment. And you might say, well, how can you even say that? Well, I am good friends with a biochemist at NDSU. So we test our product. So our rolled oats is 400% more antioxidants than anything on the shelf. We check our buckwheat. We check our wheat. There's micronutrients when you're in the Midwest that we're really not getting compensated for. But yet we know it's good for our families, so much better than a lot of things that are imported or things on the shelf. So embrace your Midwestern, heritage, because you're really doing a good job. We've been organic since 1997. My husband was Mr. Chemical, and I kind of kept dragging him to these meetings, and he's like, I don't know, this is just kind of weird to me. And then I think he went through a midlife crisis. So rather than get a new wife or new car, we decided to went organic. So we've got about 1,200 acres certified organic. We do both domestic and foreign markets. The domestic market sometimes hasn't caught up with the foreign. So to Taiwan, off our soybeans go. A little bit of buckwheat to them, a little bit of barley to them because they feed it to their elders. We're also one of the few growers for White Earth. We grow indigenous seeds for their seed bank, and that corn is like rocket fuel. We should have never gave that up. We should have not done that. Because when you think about indigenous, and I'm have a little bit, but that corn had a lot of nutrients that the corn you eat now does not. And they should have had goiter. They should have had goiter. They didn't have access to seafood, but it was in the corn. One of our projects, you're like, wow, okay, that's a sunflower. It's perennial sunflowers, which means it comes back. So we're about the 5th year of this, and it's over 6 feet tall. The sunflowers have a very thin neck, so you can actually roast the sunflower. Sunflower oil from perennial sunflowers is as much as an annual crop. But women that have cosmetics, a lot of the oil in there comes from sharks. We found it's in the sunflower. And so now it's a much more sustainable way. Plus the sunflowers, you can graze them after you take the crop off. So you can graze them down. We have to put a 10-foot fence around because the deer just love them. And the bees in them and the entomology that it brings is amazing. We also have several different businesses on our farm because I don't like to sleep. We have a person, an herbologist that gets different red clover and different things that forage on our land. We have the sunflower. I'm not going to do bees anymore. So we have a honeybee grower that we work with. And what we found is that the buckwheat does so much better if we have him put his bees in the middle of the field. We make a nice little place for him, and our production and our buckwheat just rockets. You can see where the bees don't go. And the honey that it gives me is 8 times the antioxidants of any other kind of honey. It's beautiful. We have chickens. The kids started this when they were young. All the kids had businesses on the farm. So we started with chickens, then we had turkeys. We started at 6 turkeys. Pretty soon we're at 360 turkeys. And then pretty soon I'm like, I can't, whoa, we gotta, do we keep going? But the heirloom turkeys at Thanksgiving, freshly slaughtered, never frozen, I was getting prime money for that. So we did that. We also, this is kind of a funny guy. He's one of the head horticulturists at NDSU. Okay, who sells dandelions? Anyone? Okay, we do. Because Korean and Asian people love dandelion greens before they flower. So does he pay us? No. Does he give us a bunch of plants because he's a horticulturist? Yes. So it's a nice trade. And then we're at zero waste. So all of our grains, and a lot of you guys know this, is that if they're thins or they're split or they're whatever, when you clean the grain, you've got chicken and pig and cattle people and homesteaders. So I said, come on over. So we have a waiting list right now. I haven't bought beef or meat for 30 years because we trade. Good for them, good for me. Well, okay. This is one of our products too. We have an agreement with White Earth, the Ojibwe, that we grow traditional corn for them, for the elders and for their families. So I'll take back a bunch, I'll plant it, I'll tend to it. We do it in ceremony, we do it with respect. And then most of it goes back to the tribe for them to eat. But I also get to retain some for chefs. So for me, it's another thing I can offer the chefs that they don't have access. As long as I don't try to sell the seed, I would never do that. But it's another thing I can offer the chefs. Give you an idea too, right now we have 7 schools that we're providing rolled oats. We have 1 hospital that we're working with because there's a whole movement. It's healthcare without harm, right? So when somebody's ill, why are we feeding them garbage? So there's a whole movement. So we have that. Also decide for yourself, do you want to be a wholesale person? Or do you want to be retail? Or do you want both? Retail drives me crazy. I'm just not set up for that. We thought we would try it right before COVID. So we put the on button thinking we'll get a few orders, and we had $70,000 worth of business in 2 months. And I hated every minute of it. And the family was hiding from me because I would say, I need help. We had rooms filled with boxes to send because there was this big drive. But I also felt that it was going to slam down as soon as Target put flour back on the shelves. So we turned it off. And that's one thing that maybe you're better at. But when you have retail people, they think you're Amazon. So if you don't have that order to them in 2 days, they're on the phone. Where's my order? Where's this? Blah, blah, blah. And so I just hated it. I'm not real good at retail. So what I do is kind of push people to go to the natural grocers, to go to the grocery store, to go to the chefs where I work with so they can buy the product. It's good for small business, right? They stock it on the shelves. I drop off 30, 40 of them. And I don't have that 1 pound here, 1 pound there. It's just not good for me. I get really crabby, so we don't do that. Noreen Thomas also we have new packaging. You can see that online. We're just launching that. We have a pancake mix. We have rolled oats. It's kind of like what your ancestors ate. It's that thick rolled oats that people just love. The U of M did a study, and I thought, okay, my customer is women. And they said, no, it's not. And I was like so surprised, but it's men. Simple ingredients. They can count on that just to be rolled oats. They can add the sugar they want. They can do whatever they want. So the males, which much more loyalty to the brand. And especially at this juncture of life, we're all trying to be more healthy. So it's just, they get it, and they're my customer, which is kind of a surprise. We also do high technology on the farm because I'm kind of a nerd that way, and I like it. So we're up to composting probably 350,000 tons in a couple years. We also have a program called Take Jack Back. So the whole county, I get them all excited. Yes, we're going to do it. And after Halloween, they put all their pumpkins in a tote, and the tote is hauled to the farm. We're at 350 tons that we saved from the landfill, and it's wonderful for composting. So if you can get your county to revved up, it's called Take Jack Back. And all those pumpkins come to our farm, and it's just been a really, really positive for us. Well, maybe that's it for me. Oh, maybe can I advance it this way? Yeah. No, it's stuck. Good. And which one are you touching?
This one here.
Okay. All right. So another thing that we do is, when you have kids, they should have businesses on the farm. So he took some of our grain and started growing mushrooms. So at his peak, he was probably 300 pounds a week, which, at $12 a pound, he paid for college. He did. He graduated with no debt. And so you can also integrate that if you have grain, nice grain, you can grow mushrooms. Do it on your farm. Here's a picture of pumpkins. This is just one load. We probably have 4 or 5 per year of the pumpkins, and they add a lot of moisture to your compost. It adds a lot of nutrients to your compost as well. That's our packaging. We're coming out with a bright red one too. Those are compostable, those bags. We had, if you're in Minnesota, you get a cost share, 50% if you're labeled back your money. Excuse me. I don't know.
Hey.
When we talk about retail, people have to get warmed up to you because they don't know you, right? And they want someone they can trust. They want a real person. They want a real farmer. They want a name, Bob's Red Mill. You can see his picture in your brain, right? So the things to do is have on-farm events, partner with others, have gatherings of people, have educational classes, on your farm so that people get to know you and trust you. We've actually had Gabe Brown on our farm, and I invited a few people, and 76 showed up for lunch. So it was, that can blow up on you too, but get people to come out to the farm. We have 8,000 people in 5 years through the farm. Those are your customers for the retail, and they will be loyal to you for the whole life, even if your pricing is a little bit more. So when you're doing grains, we clean on farm, and I'm helping, I think there's 6 other farmers. They're all women under 30. They all return to the farm. I didn't really see this coming, but we share equipment. So we share cleaning equipment. We can do different equipment that we can share. We also got a new harrow. So 3 or 4 of us will share that as well. So it's just another interesting proposal when you work with grains. We do buckwheat, we do rye, we do millet, We do hard red spring. We do winter wheat. We do hay for Organic Valley. Probably about a fourth of it is sold direct, and the rest is more what my husband likes is semi-loads, to go out. So when you grow grain too, make sure that quality, and we can get into that later, is up to par. If you're going for the food market, really that's the top, but you also have to work for it. So with that, we probably have one more. One of the things I didn't see coming is all these women returning to the farm. And so we have events on our farm because how many of you, grew up knowing how to grease the zerks? I'm like, I don't even know where the zerk is. What are you talking about? With my husband. So we had on-farm training for the women through the implement dealer, where we taught the women how to grease things, how to do, maintenance on, and it could help bond people too, because you'll find that women are more communicative. They're talking more to each other and sharing. So we kind of have a space for the women farmers. I have sons, I have a husband, but it's just that the women kind of needed a place, so they can always come out to the farm. And we trade ideas. We're also doing a marketing, so in a year I'll know the outcomes of that if we do better than the average for marketing, because we're all comparing notes. We might sell a load together, because if you only have a truckload, and you talk to a buyer, they want a semi-load. So can you work together? And we also work together for transportation costs. So if we're shipping totes or something, we're all sharing one account to make it very economical. So with that, I better let our next one, Tim, but I'm open for questions later too.
Thank you, Noreen. You do such a good job with community and partnerships. I'm glad you touched on that. All right, Tim, Ohio Till Farmstead's going to take us home.
All right. Well, thank you. Pretty cool to be here. So my name's Tim Schacht. Our farm's Ohio Till Farmstead. I'm going to tell you a little bit of the why before I tell you the how. So, we're a first-generation farm. I grew up very young, I wanted to be a farmer from a very young age. It was something that Mom and Dad had 4 acres. We grew up in the country. So I was around farming. There was a beautiful Angus farm across the street from us that baled hay. Not a lot of row crops, though. But my great-grandpa was a kind of a gentleman farmer, and he had a lot of old Ohio farmer magazines from the 1950s that, for whatever reason, were stuck in a drawer somewhere. And I found when I was probably 8 years old. And I just would leaf through these old Ohio farmer magazines and just loved them. It was that picturesque Norman Rockwell style of farming, right? The 1950s, talking about, the diversification of that time of farming, the old bank barns. I just ate that up, and I just wanted to do that one day. So let's fast forward, got into 4-H, met some friends. They had cattle farms, threw a lot of hay bales in high school, and the realization of, wow, it's going to take a lot for me to start farming without ever having a life or a family that has land, has equipment. I knew nobody other than my buddies that I was in high school with. So I thought, well, that's not for me right now. Maybe it'll be a retirement hobby. So I went to school. I was always a gearhead, loved old antique tractors. I had old 1950s Massey Harris tractors when I was in high school. That was my cool thing. So I went to school for diesel mechanics, did like a kind of a associate's degree in diesel mechanics, got out, was a semi-truck mechanic for about 8 years. Really hated that environment, just being covered with grease and oil constantly, just being a number, trying to get that equipment out the door as fast as possible. And at the time I met this girl, and she's like, you don't have to do this the rest of your life. You're only in your 20s. And now that girl's my wife. So at the time I was working night shift. I was trying to go back to school. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I didn't want to be a mechanic anymore. So I was going towards civil engineering. So I started taking the courses, doing night classes, still working full-time as a truck mechanic. And, I just got overwhelmed with trying to do everything. And this is kind of probably a thing, a repeating thing in my life. But I finally quit being a truck mechanic, applied myself, and I ended up going to Ohio State for architecture. So I have a bachelor's degree in architecture. Did that for a while, about 10 years working in an architecture firm. That moved us to Columbus, Ohio. And then my wife, girlfriend at the time, moved down, followed me. She got a job on the outskirts of kind of Columbus area in a little town called Marysville, and it's what we call home now. So through life will pull you in all these different directions, and somehow it is meant to be sometimes. So I was thinking about going back to school to become a licensed architect. And in Ohio, you have to have a master's degree in architecture to actually sit for the registration exam. And at the same time, I had a really good friend pass away suddenly. He was my age, had kids my same age, and at the same time, my dad was starting to develop dementia. So this rethinking, maybe this is my midlife crisis of becoming a farmer, but this rethinking of, is going back to school and getting more debt really going to be rewarding for you in your life? So I pivoted, and I somehow talked my wife into moving outside of town, buying a little farm. We found a place, an old 1860s farmhouse, 11 acres, had some pole barns on it, but it was a start. And thinking about this dream of having this 1950s Norman Rockwell grain farm was starting to take off. I obviously went to school for architecture, and I actually really love Frank Lloyd Wright. He has a saying of, I'm sure a lot of Wisconsinites are probably beat to death about Frank Lloyd Wright, but, his whole thing about organic architecture and the act of work, the goodness of using your hands with natural material is really rewarding for your body and soul. I find that very much true, and it's something that I lost from going from a mechanic to a behind the desk sitting there on a computer. And it's something I wanted to bring back to my life. Luckily, I'm lucky now. I still have an off-farm job. I work for Ohio State University in their facilities department, which is still architectural related, but it allows me to work from home 3 days a week, and I commute down to campus 2 days a week. So it works out well with our farm currently. So it's pretty cool to see, I'm standing in an organic architecture here is Frank Lloyd Wright term talking about organic agriculture. So here's our farm. Our saying here is at Ohio Till Farmstead, we believe in local, community, and hard work. I believe so much of all of this. That farm that I grew up across the street from when I was a kid got developed into houses. So it was pretty, we basically, that was our farm like growing up. Like we didn't help the farmer because we were really little, but we ran through the woods, ran through the creeks, rode four-wheelers on the land. We were really connected to that land. And even though my parents didn't grow up as farmers, my dad was a carpenter, my mom was a crafter and painter and a homemaker. They instilled a lot of good traits and lifelong lessons in us. So the hard work comes in every day, and building that community around how you can reconnect agriculture with a local community is really important to me. So starting out, we only had that 8 acres. So I had to figure out, how am I going to get rid of this grain that I want to grow, right? So right away, I started researching what kind of crops were easy to market from a retail point, because I knew I wasn't going to sell this bulk. I didn't know anybody. I didn't know any buyers at this time. I was still learning how to farm in general. I didn't run a combine until I bought a combine. I didn't run over a 100-horse tractor or a planter until I bought a planter and did it myself. But I read about it just from a young age. I just could envision doing these things because I was very passionate about it. So here's my 2 sons. There's Henry and Harrison. Harrison's in the back now. He's about a foot taller. This was just taken this summer, and these kids grow like weeds. My wife over there that convinced me to doing this, and now I convinced her into let's start a farm. So just really living the dream right now with this. This is kind of our farm profile. We're obviously a first generation. We bought our place in 2019, started putting our first crop in 2020 during COVID. So it actually worked out really well because I was still in architecture at that time, got a taste of how demanding even farming 8 acres organically was, and really realized that these two lives weren't going to jive. So I ended up getting laid off from this job due to COVID. I got to stay home and be a full-time farmer for 3 months with some severance pay, which was amazing at the time. And it gave me an idea of what I needed to do. So these are the crops we grow at this point. I wanted to be connected to that community, and really retail was that way to be connected to your community, and educating them and being the face of this, this brand of what I wanted this to be. So we started out with a popcorn. We're pretty much known as the popcorn farmers in our county. There's not a lot of popcorn farmers in our region, so it works out well. I don't have to worry about cross-pollination or anything that goes along with that. Our first year we did, I think it's here, so this is kind of our growth pattern thus far. We were in our 6th year this year. So first year, 8 acres. I grew some red popcorn, yellow popcorn, and Hollis oats. Really, I needed a product where the end consumer knew what to do with it, that I didn't have to mill, didn't have to do a lot of marketing for. The average consumer sees a kernel of popcorn and they know what to do with it. Same with the oats. Even though I grew a Hollis variety, and we all know that grow Hollis varieties, that the pain that they can be, but at the same time, at a small amount, I was able to sell that pretty well. And there, I just, I started with a lot of grass crops my first year and realized just with my, reading and understanding what it took to do a really good crop rotation, I needed something else. So I reached out and I was like, I need to continue to grow these crops to continue to supply a retail brand. How do I get a rotation? So did a post on Facebook asking for if anybody had fields to rent, picked up 30 acres that next year, and just started rolling from there. That next year, you can see some of the crops we grew. We brought sunflowers in to get a broadleaf into our rotation. I did some research just learning about how other farmers were selling sunflowers as birdseed, and I thought that would really pair well because I'm already starting to market this retail popcorn. A pesticide-free birdseed would go really well with that, and that has actually been a very good seller for us ever since. A lot of this, when you're trying to talk about marketing a diverse rotation, it really comes down to building this brand. Educating the consumer, being the face, like all of my panelists, they've all talked about as well. So, we're very mission driven. I didn't grow up on a farm. I never dealt with any kind of chemicals or anything like that. So I'm a consumer first. So when I approach farming and my products, I think of it as a consumer before I actually think about it as a farmer, which I think is super important for this line of farming and marketing. Sharing your story. One thing, when I was in high school, Instagram and Facebook, Facebook was just barely starting, but social media was not around. This is such a huge free thing that we have now that we didn't have growing up. And, if this would have been around when I was younger, maybe it would have been more in my future to start farming more at a sooner pace than I am now. Just transparency, telling your story on social media, listing it out, having a mission, and all your important things that go along with having an entrepreneurial business is so key to this side of doing this. And then quality over quantity. I've had times where I'm like, I'm going to grow a hell of a yellow dent corn crop, and it didn't fit my mission for our business because I didn't have the retail chains and the buyers set up just to grow a hybrid yellow corn. No one wanted it. I was better off just growing my popcorn and really telling the story behind those crops, or the crops that have that history, like, a lot of people know like Turkey Red and Bloody Butcher and all of these like heritage grains that really have a history that the end consumer can really latch onto is very important to this. Just growing some hybrid that no one's ever heard of is very risky from a retail perspective because it takes education, it takes a lot of time to get the consumers to, even bakers and some of the more wholesale processors, to really come around to it. So here's some of our fields, some of the crops we grow. I tried to get a little bit of everything in here, from some of our corn to the clover to einkorn, spelt, and I want to turn them into that. So I want to have a nice, diverse line of retail products because I already have this supply chain built to the point where I'm marketing popcorn. I'm at about 12 different independent grocery stores in Ohio. And when they're already carrying my popcorn, it's really easy to say, hey, I have these other varieties of popcorn, or I have some birdseed, or I have some, wheat berries. Can I put those alongside? And 99% of the time, they're going to say yes. The other important thing is when you're talking to these retailers, they need to know your story and they need to buy into who you are. I've reached out to folks that don't understand me, that don't understand why we're doing this. They're never good customers for you. It takes a real special retailer or buyer to understand who you are, why you're growing this, and really to buy in and be a partner with you. So here's coming to some of the marketing we've done. I do a little bit of everything. So online retail, farmers markets, all the way down to the commodity stuff now that we've grown our land base. The only commodity crop I grow is soybeans. We grow the organic now that we're certified, and then we grow non-GMO on some of our distant fields. I really enjoy the wholesale, retail, and bulk area. That is where I try to focus the majority of my time. The retail online, like Noreen said, it can be 1 pound at a time. The nice thing about this kind of farming setup that I have, you got to kind of think of it as a lot of little hammers instead of just one big one when you're dropping off the elevator. It's a lot of little things, but it's also a very slow sale process. When you're selling these a pound at a time, a 50-pound bag at a time, or a super sack at a time, I kind of use my soybeans. They're my cash flow crop. That's what I pay rent with for my fields. All these other ones are income, hopefully. But starting to get more into selling to millers, distillers, chefs, and really the Achilles heel at this point, since I'm kind of a one-man show, is distribution, trying to get these products around the state. Shipping's expensive. If you can do a pallet, great, but a lot of the time people don't actually want a pallet. And building a community. I couldn't do what I do without a lot of other people that believe in us. We sell at our farmers market. When I was actually in architecture, I helped to restore our community theater in Marysville, the Avalon. I'm on the board for it now, and we donate all the popcorn that they sell at the Avalon. So something really cool, and they help promote us. Also, our local tourism for our county. We do bus agritourism for our county. So we bring bus loads of people in. We educate about us, the process. The coolest thing, I think, is, that farthest picture there, they had a little thing just to kind of celebrate where we've come from tourism, because we have a bunch of covered bridges in our county, and that's kind of our tourism thing. These buses come around, they see the tours, they lunch on the bridge, and then they come to kind of some of the farms and stuff around the community. But the coolest thing is when our tourism folks are going out and trying to get these buses and other tourism places to come to our community, instead of giving out a little knick-knack or a stress ball that says visit Union County, they actually take my popcorn and just little sample sizes, and they distribute that to the folks at those events. So I think that's pretty cool of them. And that's it. So there's the boys very young in some of our fields. So thank you.
We did go a little over on time, but there's a few questions I want to get to with this group, and then we'll open it up to the audience to take questions as well. And there's a microphone here when we get to that. So maybe about like 10 more minutes with just us, and open up to questions while this stuff is fresh in everyone's minds. All right. Tim, you just touched on this, but this is something it's like the chicken or the egg problem. Did people find you to grow this stuff? Or, you commented on it was a values decision that motivated this want or need to diversify, doing something different. There's so much to unpack in relationships, developing market opportunities. So I want to spend some time in that. What is that process like? I mean, you're putting something in the ground, you're hoping spring or fall, you're harvesting in it, and it's going to go somewhere. So talk about that relationship development, whether it's direct to a retailer, a chef, a value add processor, whatever you feel most comfortable talking about. But how are you developing these opportunities so you can sell this stuff is what we're getting at. Does anyone want to start?
I can start. We built this market from nothing. It was incredibly difficult selling a grain that people weren't really familiar with. And so I had to do a massive amount of education about why people should care about teff. And that was the problem with the flour. We were selling it on Amazon. I'm not a food blogger. I'm not really necessarily like a super creative recipe developer, putting out recipes every week. And so when we moved to granola, the premise behind it, the motivation behind it was, let's introduce this weird new grain in a way that's really easy and accessible and familiar to people. And so there was less of a hurdle for people to get to. They were accustomed to granola, so we can try granola with this new grain and see how it tastes. And you also have to make a really high quality product so they come back. People will buy something for at least once for the marketing and for the story. You will only get the second purchase if the product tastes good. You're not going to build a loyal following without a high quality product. But in terms of the market of teff and cleaning, we really had to do a lot of that building. But because of some people in this room, we've built this network of people who are familiar with what we're doing now with the cleaning and processing. And so that has helped a massive amount. And no, I'm not being paid to say this, but Addison Grain Collaborative has been an absolutely incredible partner. I do some consulting on the side, and all of my clients are Addison Grain Collaborative members. So a big push for that. But yeah, that's been our experience with marketing. It's constantly telling your story, using all the platforms you can, using email, and just over and over again telling people why they should care about it in a way that's not just, soil health and care about farmers and that kind of thing. You also have to speak to their values, which is health, taste, nutrition. That is hugely important to people. And of course, price. Those things people purchase on those factors more than they purchase on values, which is upsetting. I think people in this room were like, maybe the world would be a better place if people purchased really in line with their values. But the reality is, in this economy, people have to really pick some things over others. And usually taste, nutrition, and price are going to do more for them than values aligned. So you got to hit them on all the points. You have to educate to that.
So we started at the farmer's market, and what you can do is real fun to do is use them as individuals to try out your packaging and flavor. So everything we plant is taste tested first. I worked in sensory evaluation too for Coors, and we would do many, many rounds if they're coming out with a new product. So I'm always that outside the box thinker. So what I do too for the influencers, my chefs, whatever, is I'm always inventing something new. We come up with this crazy blue corn bacon dish, and the chef, it's their number one seller. So when he orders, we went from a couple of pounds to hundreds of pounds. And now when I look at that price, yeah, I'm messing around with it. I have to treat it a little bit more, baby it. But, I'm probably at $120 a bushel. But I've also had to work for that. So I think also getting those people in front of you and also in the room, and when you're at the farmer's market and you're just starting out, there's going to be somebody in retail that shows up and said, can we use your product in our store? Then you start. But I unbelievably would test the public. I'd move packages around. I'd move different increments and just see which one they pick up and which one they look at. And your number one test for packaging is children. Put it on the shelf and the child grabs one of your packages, it's a win. If the kid just goes, then you haven't hit your target. Children are very sensitive, so grandkids are now employed at our farm. No one stands around. Everyone has to work.
So for me, kind of starting out to try to market this stuff, I didn't have a market or no one knew me. So really, it was growing it, it was the egg before the chicken type of thing, or however you want to phrase it. But it really kind of came down to that community aspect. I was already really active in our community. I was involved in a lot of downtown organizations that are trying to revitalize our downtown, because at the time there was not, there was no retail stores. There was nothing. There was all the old brick and mortar 19 or 1800s buildings had nothing in it other than like insurance agencies. So I was really involved in kind of trying to revitalize that downtown through like my day job as being the kind of architect and city planner type of thing. At the same time, our county opened up a local sourcing gift shop. And that first year, they asked if they could have our popcorn in that gift shop. And just through them promoting us, our farm, how we grow things that were local, it took off like crazy. We sold so much popcorn. And from that point on, it kind of started growing our brand. And then I said yes to a lot of things at that point of just trying to be out there, talk at events like this, get your name out there. I'm not an extroverted person really, but you have to sell who you are and your mission. And it's so important to get yourself out there. You're not going to sell a lot of stuff if you're just waiting for the buyers. You have to go to them. You have to educate them. You have to tell your story. That's just been so important for our business. Social media, those of you that follow me on social media know that I'm constantly posting stuff on, usually stories. I don't do a lot of posts, but I just love that. And I also love cross-pollinating, sharing other farms that do similar things to mine. I don't care about competition. My buyers buy from me because they know me and they believe in our product. We don't sell the cheapest thing. Don't worry about selling the cheapest thing. Worry about selling yourself, and your products will sell. That's what I think.
That is phenomenal advice, all of you. I was making notes for myself and my own work, but to recap, farmers markets are a great opportunity to demo packaging, different size packaging. These are food-grade grains or culinary grains. It's food, so it has to taste good. Flavor is important, and you can sample at farmers markets. You are going to be educating folks about these grains if it's something they're not commonly seen in the grocery aisle. Often, grains are kind of the last bastion of the local foods movement, and there are a lot of education needs to come along with it. But starting with the local community too, I think that's priceless advice. And you're going to have to go to them. They are not going to find you. I do want to talk about two more things before we get to questions from the audience. One is on story, and we hear this all the time. Like, you got to tell your story well. And I get emails from folks in our network like, okay, how do I do that? Like, how do you get good at telling your story? And I know each of you a little bit. Your websites are well done. You tell your stories really well. You speak very well about this, but that comes with some practice. So how did you uncover what was resonating with the customers and the folks that buy from you? You say it's a story. How did you kind of nail that story?
I'll start real quick. So kind of back to where I said, like, all things happen for a reason. When you're going through architecture school, and also just being a mechanic at a very young age that was introverted, I had to talk to like a lot of older people that were more experienced and kind of more intimidating than me. So it got me out of my shell real fast. But also, like, when I was in architecture, you were kind of thrown to the wolves. You had to present a project every semester of like your design, right? And you had to get up in front of a board, and that really taught you to be tough. You had to take the punches from all of these critiques that we had. And that really helped me get out of my shell and to really sell what I'm doing, whether it's a project at that point or now a product or a farm or what I do as a practice. That really helped me personally. So practicing, not being afraid to get kicked down a lot. You're going to hear no a lot from buyers or from folks that don't understand you or don't align with the same values that you have. But a lot of practice and running it through your head why you're doing this.
I think practicing a 3-minute little about your story. And you can do that at the farmer's market. They come up and say words, about you. And if they kind of look like, what do you mean? That's not it. And then your name. Sometimes I kind of screwed up. Doubting Thomas, they're like, what are you saying? So then I say, Doubting Thomas, like, you doubt us, you doubt it's going to rain. So kind of practice those things too. And then you'll see people like, you should be over at the Hilton riding the elevator. And so you have somebody in the elevator and it'll say, oh, hey, you going to the conference? Oh, yeah, and blah, blah, blah. And then, you can start with these really quick little minute things. And you can see it in their eyes because strangers are so painfully honest. If they just kind of like, oh my God, then you're not on point. But practice. Don't do it with your friends. Just do it. Start at the farmer's market, start at the elevator over at the Hilton, have your little product in your arm, and then just go up and down a couple of times and try things. And you'll be surprised. People don't have attention spans really long, so you get to the key points. And then what they think is important. Like, I never thought it was important. 6th generation farm. I'm like, okay, yeah, wow, we're old. But it was... that resonated that we had been there in that space for a long time and had survived. So I think it's really important to, and with the women I work with and the new American farmers too, is practicing their story. People are interested on how in the world did they ever get over here? So I think it's just practicing and watch reactions of people, the facial. And if you see a really super busy person, it's usually the accountant in a firm, if you're working part-time. Try it on them, and if you get their attention, bing, you got it.
Everything that Noreen said is highly accurate. I practiced at farmers markets to shorten my pitch, super, super short, get it down to 1 or 2 sentences. But what I would do, I think I really fine-tuned it when I would pitch grocery stores. So I would walk into a grocery store, look for the buyer, and you have, if you're lucky, 5 minutes with them. And usually it's honestly only 3 minutes. So you have a minute to tell your story, a minute to talk about case pack sizing, ordering info, and a minute for their questions. So you really have to do it really quickly. So what I ended up doing was I would wear my overalls and put my phone in my pocket and hit record. And so I would record my pitch and record their reaction without them knowing. And then I would go back and watch it and listen to it. And I would try to find, similar to what Noreen was saying, is where are you losing them? What are they actually interested in? And so grocery stores have a totally different list of priorities than the people at the farmers market. So you do have to change your story. Not change your story, but change how you tell your story with different customers or that kind of thing. But the best was, riding elevator. That triggered me, Noreen. That I am triggered right now. But definitely recording myself going to store pitches was really helpful.
Thank you. Great advice. Practice makes perfect. Use that farmer's market opportunity. Friends and family, practice on them. All right, we're going to move from the story to the supply chain. Well known that small scale processing infrastructure for a lot of these grains doesn't exist or is few and far between. Each of you have had to figure out, how am I going to get this from field to, bagging, a retailer, whoever. You've had to think through the unique post-harvest handling, equipment for cleaning and additional processing on farm or nearby. We could really go down a rabbit hole here. So in your response, maybe things, I don't know, top 3 things to keep in mind or to think about if you're moving from maybe an organic feed grade operation, exploring food grade opportunities. What should you know?
For me, so obviously that was, post-harvest handling is key. It's like the Achilles heel, right? You could do a great job raising it and then stick it in a bin or a bag or however, and it could go bad real fast. So I've learned the hard way on a few crops, but luckily I educated myself and was the anxiety was high enough that I did a pretty good job my first year. So I bought a couple old clipper cleaners, off of Facebook Marketplace, and was able to get those working well enough to clean popcorn and oats for me. So luckily I didn't have to reach out to anybody at that point. But, trying to find cleaners is huge. Luckily I have Bridget at Herschel's just 2 hours north of me. They're great with cleaning some of my stuff because I don't have a dehauler. I don't have some of the big equipment. I don't have a color sorter. So finding other partners like that to work with is key. You know, and you want something that you can scoop out of a bag and toss it into a sack and not worry about there being any foreign objects in there, because that's what the consumer is going to look at, or the buyer, or the miller, or the whoever. That's been key to have partners to help with that. And really, AGC has been, you know, I know we all talk about it, but AGC has been awesome with that, with labeling, understanding, you know, nutritional fact labels, also calling your local state ag board, food safety folks. I talk to the Ohio Department of Ag a lot on labeling requirements, things like that, to try to educate it. And you got to pull that stuff out. It's just not easy to find. You have to call them, talk to them. They'll send you something that's made for like General Mills, an enormous business, and then you have to be like, okay, well, we're going to backtrack this down to like a small size, right? So there's a lot of conversation that has to happen for like what's required, what isn't required. Yeah.
I think for storage of grains is moisture. Everyone get a moisture tester because you can guess, but if you're putting it in the bin at 16, 18%, you're going to have probably a mess. So we also watch in the combine right away. When we're looking at the fields, we're taking that moisture test in the field. Our monitor in our combine doesn't work really well. So a handheld is probably about $300 roughly. But even if you're close to an elevator where you can take that sample in right away so you know what's going into the bin. Also, sometimes people forget, put it in the bin and forget about it. So checking it, maybe doing some moistures within it. We have the advantage of being the coldest cold, like I said. So our stuff stays really long because it's so cold, right? It's minus 20 last week. As far as moving the product to once you have it packaged, I'm going to hustle to get that. The most I can get that person to buy at one time. Like, for instance, I sell to a food hub. So I could triple her order because I'll say, hey, I'm going to Minneapolis, no shipping. Boom, she'll put in this big order so I can move a lot of product at once instead of that 1 or 2 bags. And, for the schools, I can also get them to say, hey, would you like, the pellet's going to be a lot cheaper for you. Would you like that for the kids? So I can get them to go from half a pellet to a full pallet, giving them the price breakdown. Because the bigger quantities, you get cheaper shipping. Or if you're going by there, throw out, hey, no shipping, take off your trip for taxes because you're delivering. So it works.
So I would say a really important thing for us has been having the right partners and buyers who are willing to invest in you. And that investment looks like patience. We've had loads sent back, which was devastating. They came and tested, and we had Indian meal moths, and it was, middle of summer. We're in Michigan. It's just a thing. And the buyer wasn't concerned because they're common in grain. And so he shared what he would recommend that we do, send it to cold storage, clean it after a month, and it was totally fine. So for us, pests have been an issue, and so there is a whole pest control plan that we have, and part of that is keeping the facility temperature controlled. So if you can, that's the ideal. But everything that Noreen and Tim have said for sure, but finding the right buyer partners or whatever partnerships that your operation is looking at, having the right people who are values aligned, if you can, who will understand that there's not always good days in farming and processing. There's also some bad news and, the truck is delayed or a part broke and that kind of thing. So you really want the right partners. And when you do have them, treat them really well and they'll treat you the same.
All right, I think we have about 10 minutes left. We can open up to questions from the audience. If you have a question, feel free to jump up to the microphone here, and we'd love to hear from you.
My question is going to be about tests. And how do you get your seed? And is seed for teff available? And could you detail some of the growing? Thank you.
So our friend brought some over from Ethiopia in his suitcase is where we got our seed. But since then, we have been trying out new varieties. I think we got some from Desert Oasis out in Nevada. I believe Nebraska was growing some. So I think University of Nebraska, I have my contact there, so I can share it with you, Gil. But that's where I think we've gotten some seed. But I'm going to be honest, teff is not friends with Michigan. We're having a really hard time with it. But because I built an entire brand using teff, we kind of have to keep growing it. So, it works. Yeah.
Good, Pat.
Great.
I really enjoyed this session, listening to all your stories. Thank you. Question about your bags. How did you go about your bag designs? And was AGC a big part of that in finding some of your designers? Or could you just each talk a little bit about that process?
So I started with bags from a regular online bag supplier. It was the Craft bags, and I put a stamp on it because stamps were more affordable than stickers, and I was counting the pennies. So we would have a stamp on the front, which I would have to run if it were raining because the ink would run and it would look a mess. But then eventually I wanted to move us to a plastic bag. So I hired a designer who designed our bag, and I told him what I wanted people's emotions to be when they looked at the packaging, and then he gave me a design, and I was like, whoa, you were worth $7,000 for sure. So that was that, and then I ordered them from China. Do not recommend. And then we've moved to digital printing now, but I will only work with designers because I am not a graphic designer. So we invested in branding because we knew that customer-facing part is really important, and you really got to grab people's attentions. Just like Noreen was saying, our packaging really grabs people, and they really like it. And it's a super high-value education point, and it takes people to our website. So we invested in packaging, and it's definitely, the ROI is very high on that.
I think with ours is experimenting. We first had the craft bags, and someone said to me, they're disappearing on the shelf. You can't see them because it was just a beige color. And then here's a huge tip, you guys. Anyone near a college that has graphic designer for academics, they have to do a senior project. You are the answer. So I had someone contact me, a student, who came up and said, I really like your farm. And she said, I will design this as my senior project. Wow, okay. We have since changed it a couple of times, but it gave me that first initial. She got an A, and I went to her big presentation and Doubting Thomas Farms. It was lovely. So if I was you, beginning, bootstrapped, I would, hello, I'm your new friend. And get a hold of the professor. And what you're doing for that student is that you're giving them pamphlets and things when they apply for a job that they've actually done hands-on product. 3/4 of the students were making up projects about some goofy airline or something. That doesn't do anyone good. Get a hold of that professor. You're the new friend.
I'll definitely agree with Noreen with trying to find a college student to do it. Obviously, hiring someone that was professional would be awesome. I didn't have $7,000 to do that. I didn't even have $7,000 to buy it. I didn't even have $7,000 to buy my first tractor or combine. So I designed all of our labels myself since I had that background of going to school for architecture. At the same time, you also learn graphic design in the same thing because you're developing presentations and renderings and everything like that. So to date, everything that I've done has been my own hand doing. I run it by people for critique and other friends I have that kind of know more about graphic design than I do. But for the most part, I'm just in-house for everything because I'm cheap, I guess.
Do you think we can achieve cost parity with like the 95% of the pie that we're all wishing we had? And if we can't, are we going to end up pursuing the same 5% customers and, race to the bottom kind of a thing?
Good question. We stick with that one.
You can't act it. That's nice.
The answer would be maybe not 95%, but I think if we think outside of the box, right now, right in front of us is if tariffs go on Canada, where are we going to get 98% of our oats that we get from Canada? If red dye, and I'm on this one, I'll let you know next year. If red dye is being taken out of medicines and other things, food is coming. What can they color red? Corn. So bam, let's get in front of this curve. And the next generation or two for me maybe, I'm really not that old, but 2 generations more, where are they doing? Dogs and cats are the new kids. So for us to have, we sell to the pet food, high-end grains. You could eat them. You and I could eat those dog biscuits, really. But, that's something people are going to spend money on. So I think we have to think outside the box and make that different. I've got a zillion ideas, and that's where I get in trouble. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I grapple with this question a lot too. Just because I see a lot of us in like this room and other farms I talk to locally that are trying to do similar things, right? We all kind of want to do it all. We all want to have a mill or a cleaning operation, and we all kind of want to hold it to ourselves, right? I don't know. And I try to pull myself out of that every single time I think about it. Like just yesterday, I was talking to the folks at Hallie, and I was like, oh, it'd be really, really cool to have a mill. And I go back and I reflect on me saying that, and I really don't. I love farming a lot. I don't want to be a miller. I don't want to worry about blending flour and things like that. But I'll sell you grain, and I'll do a good job of it. But at the same time, I think small portions and cooperatives and how can we pull together to sell this stuff is so important. How we can just, everybody that has the same belief and how we can try to get together, I think is kind of more the future than us trying to do this singularly as farmers or entrepreneurial businesses, right? Whether that's supplying grain to other farms that have a retail packaging line or other folks that have mills or people that make feed. It doesn't have to be food related. It can be also feed related or, how can you work throughout the value chain to try to get these things out there, I think is key. So I think that's kind of where my mind goes when I hear that kind of question and when I think about it to myself.
I feel like this is the time for our specialty grain co-op to actually start, which has, I swear, Alyssa and I have been talking about this idea for years. So if anyone's interested in a specialty grains co-op, let me know. We'll just find money somewhere. We'll write a grant.
Well, we are coming up on time. We could definitely do another question if someone has a burning question, or you can find all 3 of these folks walking around the conference as well. Do you have Julie?
Let's really
Yeah.
What is the hospital? I'm really curious how that works. And do you think that is the avenue to have more markets, like hospital and school story, or is that into a lot of work? How did that come about?
I actually love working with them because the schools, and you have to kind of get after your legislators. If you're in Wisconsin, Illinois, I'm sorry, but if you're Minnesota, you're good because they gave money, Minnesota Department of Ag gave money to the schools to buy from emerging and beginning farmers as well. So they're looking, especially in wintertime, for schools, but also get a hold of the food service directors because sometimes they're interested in doing local food Thursdays. Right now we're going to be working with Minneapolis. They serve 1 million meals. Okay, so even if you get a little slice of that pie, that's great. We're actually going to do Native American education with meal kits for the kids to go home that are indigenous because we can do that. But the schools are lovely. They don't care about the labeling. You know, they're in big bulk sacks. That's what they're used to. And if it's women working in the food service, usually then do 25 pounders because 50 you're going to get a complaint. They're going to break the bag. You know, it's lovely. They send me a text and they'll say, I need to fill this grant 500 pounds of whatever rolled oats in it. The pallet goes. So I think we need to get after legislators too, because if you're a school system and your taxpayers are paying for it, why are we importing food for our children? So it's like you got to get the moms revved up and go to the school board or kind of start pushing and get that through and say, we can even do one day. Come on, guys, you know. And they'll say, well, we're on a budget. But it's like, well, who's your budget people? You know, we'll give them a break if they have that. So I think it's a little bit of hustling, but once they get to know you and know that that product meets what their specs are, because you guys are all whole grain, right? The school is required to do whole grain. That's your niche.
If you still have a question, but just to counter, it's still on the legislation for whole grains and aids to schools and institutions were top, but they wanted to pass a multi-plant-based legislation, which just went under the radar. So we have the avenue to that change before the but that's a time about that.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine. Any other questions before we let our esteemed panelists go? Yeah, go ahead.
Real quickly, I still want his first time at the conference. Why we're taking steps by Moorhead. Back up. My last question I get is, you know, a lot of times like the popcorn, I do a very small scale at tech it under the Farmstead Act to sell that grain, and you know that the pocket is a whole different story. So I guess just talk about your guys' process of, you know, what did you go through? What were some of the resources you looked at to take that from selling a grain to selling a fruit pop? Then you're in with the FDA, and then you have a whole other mess of regulation.
So I started in a shared commercial kitchen for the granola, and you have to be inspected by the health department, and they come in and watch you wash your hands and do dishes and make the product. But when I was showing her all of my ingredients, she was asking where each was from. And I was naive and dumb at the time. And I was like, well, this is from Meijer. Like, of course I'm going to buy retail. But then I got to our Teff and said, this is from our farm. And she was deeply upset with me because she's like, well, that's not allowed. And I'm like, this is how food is made. Like, what are you talking about? This isn't allowed. So we had to, my dad is also a lawyer and a farmer. So I went back to my lawyer dad and said, can you find the code or whatever? And we sent a little highlighted section of the law back to her. And so we got approved. But what you want to do before then is, I mean, you can print stuff and say, this is made in the kitchen. That's not licensed by the state of Indiana. You can do that. So you can operate under the cottage food law, or honestly, the health inspections really aren't too terrifying. But the food safety paperwork, when you start selling to, that's a very real, very serious, those are real serious things. And food safety is kind of confusing. So I'm more than happy to help you with your food safety plan. But there's this amazing tool out there called ChatGPT. And it is extremely useful. It's extremely useful for my food safety plans going forward, because you can prompt it with create a spec sheet for high oleic sunflower oil, and it spits out all the things, and then you just tweak a couple things. And anyway, so use technology. Like, let's save time. We don't all have to do all of it ourselves.
So for me, I'm not popping the popcorn. I'm just selling whole grains. So that's the easiest route to start with, is just whole grains. Talk to your local state ag, your food safety folks. They'll walk you through it. Be prepared that they're going to take the more stringent route than the more easy route. Even at the local level, for us trying to sell at the farmers market in our county, they required us to get a mobile food vendor's license, AKA what a food truck would need. So I had to back them down and have them understand, I am selling a raw agricultural commodity. You cannot eat this. It has to be processed at some point. They didn't care. They still made me pay the $250. They said, "Oh, you don't have to have a hand sink." And I was like, "It's a no-brainer. I'm at a folding table at the farmer's market, so I'm not going to have a hand sink there." They're like, "Okay, well, just get some hand sanitizer." Granted, this was at the same time COVID was happening, so they might have been a little gun shy and conservative on a lot of this stuff. But have a lot of conversations. Be prepared for them not to have any idea what you're doing, because no one is doing small grain or grains at this small of a level, right? They're used to General Mills level processing stuff, not the farmer level. So a lot of conversations, talk to other people in your area, in your state that are doing similar things. They'll be able to talk you through what you need to minimally get through some of these health and safety regulations at your state level.
And to do with that also is insurance. So we just added on to our farm insurance and make sure it's a special rider that we are selling these products. And it's really not that expensive. Whereas if you go outside of that and just go to an insurance agent and say, "I want to have insurance liability," then wow, it's probably $550 a pop, $550 a year, and it's okay. But if you saddle that with the insurance that you exist, it's good, because some of the places you want to get into, like natural grocers, it's $1 million liability. It's kind of a pain in the neck, actually. I like natural grocers, but to get in, it's you have to be patient. So those are kind of some tips, and they'll kind of walk you, what is your food safety plan? There's one on the Addison grain collaboration that you can just plug and play. So a hint there for that, especially some of the schools. Minneapolis asks for it. The hospital do. The other ones don't. So if that's helpful, I hope.
Yeah, I just get a $2 million liability policy on my products. I don't know if it's under my farm or not. I should probably know this more. I established it a long time ago, but it's $20 a month, and it's easy enough to have and pay, just have a backup plan in case someone chokes on a kernel of popcorn and wants to sue you for all you're worth. Also, I established an LLC for my farm, so everything's protected farm-wise, that way under the LLC, and then me and my wife have our own property protected away from that, and everything's separate. This is a business, just like your farms are. Keep everything separate.
Just wanted to flag it down at the presentation table on the left-hand side. They're in table with the bunches of requested this. Two thinking materials, there's a being staff template that you can get there to get or additional rate than the Unionization Act that we have had a couple of years ago. And then there's also a resource that I can hear that John puts together last year that meets at delivering to all different kinds of buyers, roughly bakers to distillers, image manufacturers, retail mills, and just go into some of the detail and find each of the five. Looking more than question they try to ask, so on that and should dig in for.
Well, thank you, complete stranger in the audience. Our executive director, Alyssa Hartman at the Addison Grain Collaborative. I will give one last plug for the AGC. You have wonderful folks like this who are finding these pathways to market. It's best to learn from those folks who are doing it. That's what we do at the AGC. We share this info. We put it in the form of resources, or you can get on the phone and talk with someone directly when you have these questions. And that's the beauty of the collaboration, the beauty of that network. And thanks to all three of you for being AGC members and being panelists today. And thank you to OGRAIN for hosting this session. This was a lot of fun. So thank you for coming.